Welcome to part 2 of my video on weathering wagons and the various techniques that I adopt for doing the modifications and the different types of weathering. Now, I think picking up from where I left off on the last one, I was talking about open wagons. Almost half the wagons in the steam age were open wagons, and so if you're looking for realism on your layout, one of the main aspects to if you like avoid reams of empty wagons is to put various loads in them. The obvious ones are coal, of course, but many of the wooden planked wagons actually carried a whole range of different materials and products. Now, I've just put a few up here. So the first one here is what's known as a shock wagon. Now, these were introduced towards the end of the Big Four days. So the LMS and the LNER did have them. British Railways also adopted them in the 50s and 60s, and basically it was it allowed the vehicles to be shunted without it damaging the contents that was within the vehicle, and that was always indicated by the 3 stripes that you can see on this. Now, quite often the wagons would be renewed, or plankages would be renewed, so you'd see the stripes on these discontinued or not completed. So that's what I've attempted to do here, and in this particular case I've loaded them with barrels, brand new barrels, painted black and green with a yellow top, so it gives the vehicle a bit of interest as it's going round. This is a 7-plank wagon, I think, and it's loaded with timber, and you used to see timber like that, or sort of leaning up out of the vehicle, just outside the vehicle. Now, depending on what was being carried and how large that particular item was, sometimes you'd find a barrier wagon, a flat wagon, between the vehicle with the protruding load and the next vehicle. That was to avoid any sort of damage or collisions that might occur in transit. That one, as you can see, has got sleepers in it. And an easy way, if you're running out of ideas to fill your wagons, is to put a tarpaulin on top, because you used to see that an awful lot, and that makes quite an interesting look to the vehicle. You used to see that a lot. It would have some writing on the top, as you can see there. Now, moving along, I've put a small selection of vans here. These are BR built ones. Some are planked, some are just plywood sheeting, all with metal bracing. That one's a daypole. That one's a parkside. Now, essentially, it's the same van, but you can see that they're different. There's for a start, the heights are different. Now, that's really good, because back in the day when you saw these things, you'd see what were in effect identical vehicles, but somehow they were different, and the heights might vary slightly. Again, that would probably be down to the different manufacturers involved in the production of these vehicles. So the different makes from the modelers will have slight variations on them, and of course if you you can mix and match all of those and get realistic formation of vehicles. Now you can notice here that again I've done the chassis. Let's move in a bit closer. The Parkside one, and that's a Dapol one. Now a lot of the out of the box models, including Dapol, they don't run the tie bar between the axle boxes. Yeah, that's it, along there. Now what I've used for that is phosphor bronze metal strip. I think it's 1mm in thickness, and that gives a finishing touch to the vehicle, because most of these vehicles had that as very much their if you like, the sort of standard appearance and effect. Oops, I've dropped a bit of fencing down there. The other thing on these are the labels. These wagons would have quite a lot of labels and ripped off labels and things. I've attempted to just put a few on here. That gives a bit of individuality to the overall look of the vehicle. And obviously that one's for carrying perishables, in that case bananas. The grey vehicle is an unbraked or unfitted wagon, so it doesn't have continuous brakes, just the handbrake. Again, you can see that I've picked out the handles on those and the buffer shanks. Now, the other thing to sort of pick up on these is you can see they haven't really done any sort of kind of weathering on the body sides. Now, that's by and large because the wooden bodied vehicles were continually repaired and painted. That was one of the advantages of, you think, well, why do they have so many wooden vehicles right up to the end of steam and even going beyond? And the reason for that is that they're easy to repair. And they could, you know, sort of turn them round quickly and get them back in use. And it meant that they weren't subjected to the sort of continuous hammering that metal-bodied wagons were exhibited to. And if you look at the reference material, either in the books on BR goods wagons or some of the stuff on the internet, when they show these vehicles, they are extremely dirty, and most of those pictures were taken very much at the end of their days. So the pictures were taken in the 1980s when they were either already withdrawn or they were past their sell-by date, even though they might still be on the railway. And back in the day, up until say the mid-1960s, they weren't like that. They were quite clearly the bauxite brown. Just to sort of lend some authenticity to that, I'm going to look at one of the pictures on the wall that I have. And there's one there. Now if I can just pan in a bit. If you see that one there, that's what I'm trying to sort of get at. Obviously the chassis and the running gear is considerably weathered for obvious reasons, but if you look at the panelling on the side, they're still relatively clean. And as you can see, the container vehicle there has got a tarpaulin on the top. That was obviously used as a quick repair to the roof. And there is another one moving around here. This one of a Jubilee on a fitted Fish Express. going from Aberdeen down to London. So we look at those vans. Now, they're not smeared or filthy. They're relatively clean. So that's why I don't really do very much in the way of weathering wooden bodied side wagons, is because from my memory and from the examples of colour footage, which I have to say they're not very extensive, the wagons still are looking relatively clean. Now, that is not the case and never was the case with steel-bodied wagons. So if I move along, keep an eye on the time here. I've included two of the Triang cattle wagons here. Now that's based on an LMS diagram. It's not an actual prototype, it's roughly based on an LMS diagram. The chassis is not right, but what I've done with these, I've given them a complete paint makeover. You can see that the chassis is weathered, brake handle picked out, buffer shanks picked out, lots of brake dust around where the brakes are, and I've included two pieces of metal here. That was for when the doors came down, to actually hold the door in place, save it banging down. Now I've painted these bauxite brown. One is an earlier version, early BR, and that was the later bauxite, and I retransferred them. So it's brought a new lease of life to some old Triang vehicles, and I've got a whole rake of these. And to be honest, I've never really bothered buying up or looking at any of the latest versions, because, well, I've had these and for me they pass muster. The moulding on these is fantastic. I don't know if you can actually see it, but the planking on them is very, very fine planking. You can just about see it in between the struts and the panels, how fine that planking is. It's superbly detailed. And there again, I'm just moving back, you can see the weathered base on that Daypole unfitted van, and how the brake dust accumulates around on the brake side. All these vehicles, all including the oil tankers that on the previous video, I've re-wheeled them all. All of these came with plastic wheels. Now they've all got metal wheels. Most of them are spoked. The vans tend not to be spoked. As that's an unfitted one, that's got spokes, and so is that one there. But most of them are discs. 3-hole discs on the wheels. Now, what we've got here are grain hopper wagons. Now these are Daypole. Excuse me while I move along. Move this back so that's it, a bit steadier. These came in grey, and I've applied quite a liberal amount of weathering on these. So moving a bit closer on that one. Again, I put the tie bar between the axle boxes. It didn't come with that. Photographs of these vehicles showed that they did have the tie bar. The other thing I've put on that is the handle in the middle, obviously for opening and closing the doors that were underneath the wagon for the grain to be poured into a silo, or to where it's to its next consignment or to its next destination. brake handle picked out there. I had some transfers, found some transfers in my stash, so I put in bulk grain and the number. And again, being a metal bodied wagon, it would receive quite a battering. Picked out the ladder in white. They tended to do that for health and safety reasons, or at least try and keep that as clean as they could in the circumstances. I'm moving in close there. You can just about see that I've put an overhead electrification flash, warning flash there. Bit of these small details, they add up. So it's got the handle, it's got the tie bar between the axle boxes and the handle to open and close the doors underneath the silo. So as you can see, the weathering's slightly different on that. Buffers of shanks have been painted silver. Look at the top. That was used for the weathering on that paint. They painted again a mixture of rust colours, dirty black, and what is it called? Not brake dust. There's like a weathered black. There's dirty black, and you just mix them up. And using a dry brush technique, you dab the paint out of the bottle, out of the container, put it on a piece of plastic. Begins to dry off. Get an old brush that's not good for fine painting anymore. Dab it in, and then just dab it on, and it produces the effect that you see here. So there's two, and you can see the handles there which have been painted white. And these are mineral hopper wagons. I think these are Daypole. Most of these didn't have the tie bar between the axle boxes, so again it's the phosphor bronze. That one actually I think is an original. Some of them did. The earlier ones did have that tie bar. I think it was the later ones which are now being produced, they don't. Because I subsequently got a few more and found that they didn't have the tie bar. But again, you can see the kind of battering and hammering that these vehicles would have taken. Any sort of pictures that you can source will bear this out. And you do each one differently. So that one you can see has got quite a lot of weathering on the chassis and on the sole bar where the brake dust is kicked up. It pays off because each vehicle is different. It's not the same weathering. I know the manufacturers are very good at doing weathering now, but there's a tendency for quite a bit of sameness to creep in. But as you can see, it's the colour of the railway again. Because if you look at the track and you look at the ballast, it's always that brown, and that's reflected also on the chassis and on the sole bars. It's the same colour. It's almost like it blends in. And a couple of guards vans here. That's a Hornby one which I've repainted, and I put the lamps on the back. I've also applied tiny bits of round plastic which I had somewhere onto the axle boxes, which enabled me to paint the yellow axle box bearings. So they had roller bearings on. They started fitting roller bearings onto the guards vans So whilst this might look at, I've had this out for years before, this is in fact a new one. I've still got the other one. It didn't have the handles on it, so on this one I put the handles at the end, the white handles, and it's also got the 3 lamps at the back, and on that one as well. Very quickly, here's the mineral wagons which you've seen. Anyway, I'll leave it there, folks. So that's an overview of the weathering of wagons. Hope you've enjoyed that. Look forward to seeing your comments below. I'll sign off for now. Bye for now.